Well, hello everyone. Looks like we're ready to go for the Friday streams because it is Friday and it's time for anime. It's Anime Friday, whatever we want to call it. Time for some anime discussion. You can't really see the wall scroll back there, which is a bit of a shame. Oh well, such is life. Hope you all are having a good week. Have had a good week. We are moving into a holiday weekend here in the States. Hello, YK2K, Ginger Gaiden, Jay, good to see you all. We've got a nice transitionary period here because it's been a fairly long week at work. As I mentioned before, I'm one of the lead instructors at a software developer boot camp. That's right, Ginger Gaiden, I got Labor Day on Monday. And so this is their first week where they end with a project. So they're learning how to code software. And at the end of most weeks, they have a project they have to spend all day making. And this is their first day of that. And they're pretty stressed heading into that. They're really worried that it would be a really big, complicated thing. But I think they all, were able to get through that without too much worry. I don't think they added too many gray hairs to their heads, which is good. But a lot of pent-up, worry and a lot of pent-up stress and a lot of questions throughout the day of, oh, is this right? Is that what it should be? And all that kind of stuff of folks just trying to make sure they're doing it right, which is good. We want folks to care. But a lot of psychic energy, permeating the air and really, just kind of a lot to deal with. So it's nice that's over with. We'll go back next week, and I'm sure there'll be more stresses and more stuff. But it's nice going into a weekend with all of that kind of behind me. We'll probably, I would like to spend some time this weekend watching some anime. As always. Actually, AS in the chat room recommended a really weird anime that I want to check out. Just scroll back here to see what the name of that was. Because I looked it up on the various websites to see if I could figure out, just to see if I could, understand what the heck it was. And it's a weird one. It's a Mamoru Oshii OVA. Never quite sure how to pronounce that. Oshii. Okay, it must be back here somewhere. Gosenzo-sama Banbanzai. Gosenzo-sama Banbanzai is the name of the anime. It's a weird thing. Sort of a comedy OVA from the 80s and the 90s. Oh, they're adapting Uzumaki. That's cool, Jay. I had not heard that. That did not make it into the news this week, I'm afraid. So, that's cool. Good to hear. So, Ginger, what anime are you looking to catch up on? Started watching Sarazan Mai. Cool. I'm behind on Anne of Green Gables, and this would be a good weekend to just catch up on that. Hold on. It's funny watching or reading some of the random reviews of shows. Sarazan Mai, right. The latest Ikuhara anime. That was interesting first episode, definitely. Catch up on Dumbbell. Yep, cool. I love Dumbbell. That's, I think, the only anime this season I'm actually caught up on, oddly enough. It's an easy watch, right? Dumbbell, you can just, sit down and watch an episode or two and get psyched for weight training. I've actually been doing a bit more weight training myself, just inspired by that anime, which is a lot of fun. It's an easy one. Reading Arifureta, that's cool. Very cool. I read a volume of Master Keaton this week. which I was very happy to do. And oh yeah, this is an odd one. Stumbled across this. Read this week. Hikatsu by Yu Yagami. Looks like a very traditional shonen manga, right? And that is exactly what you'd think. Until you discover that Yu Yagami was the author of Those Who Hunt Elves, which is a very goofy title from the late 80s, early 90s, I believe. And this was Yu Yagami's follow-up. What I like is that it does a lot of things at once. So it absolutely has, the shonen, but it also has the comedy. It is very much a shonen comedy. The main character is an absurdly powerful martial artist living in a near future where he tries to fix appliances, and you know how if you hit a TV, sometimes it will turn on. He's trying to repair appliances by punching them, which doesn't work very well, as you might expect. So he keeps just destroying appliances, trying and testing different martial arts moves. And the idea is hopefully he will eventually figure out how to repair a machine with this incredibly powerful punch. So you get that, and you get this goofy comedy. A girl shows up who immediately falls madly in love with him, of course, right? But then you also get some great martial arts moments. Some fairly epic martial arts sequences. And it's a really fun one. It is from, when was this? 2005. It's about 15 years ago. So, not old as in Astro Boy old, but definitely been around for a while. Really fun. Also nice because apparently there are only 3 volumes. So you can get through this one fairly quickly. So I'm going to try and get through the rest of Hikatsu sometime soon. It's just a fun discovery, a high-powered shonen series. Think sort of Dr. Stone-esque. And then with a variety of characters they introduce and kind of develop over time. And some really neat world building. So they don't have airplanes anymore. Instead, they have giant armored buses that go from city to city to protect people from these these roving gangs that claim the wilderness between cities. So this is a fun one. This is a fun discovery. Yeah, and that's the neat thing is that this would not look out of place, in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. Very classic sort of style. It looks kind of One Piece-esque, a little Gintama-esque as well. Actually, I think Gintama is probably the closest, partly because the main girl actually does have a Chinese dress, so it definitely has that style. But it also has a very urban style to a lot of the other outfits. So pretty cool. So yeah, if you're looking for something fun and light, Hikatsu seems to be a good thing. Strike a blow to vivify. Fun. I tried the Those Who Hunt Elves anime, and it just was not for me because the overall tone was just really weird in terms of that that blend of comedy and action and so forth. I think it's one of those things where it's not bad. It's just a particular sort of brand of action comedy, and so it's one of those things. Hey, Game Escape, good to see you. All right, so let's go ahead, because it is, of course, another week. Let's go into the news. Look at that. Let's get down to it. And welcome back to the anime and manga news for the week ending August 30th, 2019. Kyoto Animation has reopened its official online store, which had been suspended in the wake of last month's deadly studio fire. The KyoAni shop sells goods from the studio's many productions, including merchandise of all kinds, as well as DVDs and Blu-rays. The reopening of the shop creates another way for fans to contribute financially to the studio, as well as getting more merch to show their love for their favorite series, which is pretty darn cool. There's also a separate KyoAni shop international website, currently shipping to the US only, though the selection there is very limited compared to the main Japanese shop. So, FYI, if you want to support KyoAni, that's not a bad place to go. It's also a nice place to go to not only do that, but also grow your collection. So, check it out if you're interested. Go to the Kyoto Animation online store. Also, it was announced this week that the previously planned Enjoy the World of KyoAni and Do event will be held as a memorial service for the victims of July's tragic fire. The event, which will be held on November 3rd and 4th, is typically held every 2 years as a celebration of Kyoto Animation's works. The studio suspended ticket sales and canceled the planned stage events earlier in the month, and have officially converted the event into a memorial service open to the general public. So that is a thing, and we are our hearts obviously go out to all of those involved. Speaking of, Russian-American singer-songwriter Elizaveta Kriponova, apologies for probably massacring that pronunciation, has written an original song in response to the tragedy at KyoAni. The song is entitled Meet Again and is available on iTunes and Bandcamp. All proceeds from its sales will go directly to the studio's recovery fund. The creator said in an interview, quote, "I wrote this song as a way to heal myself, even though I was just a bystander of this tragedy. I hope it may serve as a source of healing to others affected by it," end quote. Moving along to slightly happier news, but still kind of controversial. This week's installment in the saga of pirated manga shifts the focus to the international market. On Takahashi, CEO of the legal and authorized doujinshi localization service Irodori Comics, created a long and detailed Twitter thread criticizing the manga reader app Manga Rock. The app, which is available through both the Apple App Store and Google Play, hosts illegal scans of many manga series, and he even has its own subscription service. Takahashi argued that because of this, many users may not realize that what they're using is actually illegal. The Japanese Twitter thread includes steps manga artists can take to see if their works are on Manga Rock, and also encourages readers to call out Apple and Google for providing the app. Takahashi also wrote up an English summary of the points in the thread, and included a list of resources where manga can be read legally, which is not a bad thing. The original Japanese thread, as well as a link to the English version, can be found on Takahashi's Twitter at @ontakahashi. Seems like we got a new manga translation or anime translation thing every week, but continues, always continues. Anyway, Japan has officially submitted Weathering with You for Academy Award consideration. The film is now a candidate for the Best International Feature Film category, and is the first anime to be submitted for Oscar consideration since Princess Mononoke back in 1998. Huge congratulations to creator Makoto Shinkai, as well as everyone who worked on the movie, for this exciting accomplishment, and good luck to Weathering with You when it goes for consideration. To be clear, this is the Japanese, international movie. They're not saying this is the best anime. This is the Japanese, consideration for the Oscar. Pretty cool. If you've been needing a fix of pure fluffy cuteness, meanwhile, look no further. Sanrio announced at its 2019 Expo event this week that its Mukul Dreamy character will be getting a television anime next year. The anime will be directed by Chiaki Kon, with production by studio JC Staff. A manga adaptation will also begin in January and run in 2 of Kodansha's magazines. The story centers around a sentient purple stuffed kitten Mew, who has the power to enter dreams. That's horrifying. And the girl it befriends upon falling to Earth. It's Sanrio, so it'll be adorable and wonderful and all that kind of stuff. And that does look pretty adorable, let's be honest. Type Moon, known of course for the creation of Fate Stay Night and other unbelievably popular visual novels, announced on Friday that it has established a brand new game studio. According to the director of the new studio, Type Moon Studio BB, or Double B maybe, will focus on developing small-scale 2D games and create larger-scale 3D games in collaboration with other companies. The new director, Kazuya Nino, was previously a developer at Square Enix and produced the PSP game Fate Extra, a spin-off of Type Moon's Fate franchise, which I've heard is fairly popular. Studio BB is currently looking for art designers, game designers, programmers, and game managers. So if any of you are looking to get into the video game industry and speak enough Japanese to do that, this could be your chance. Hey, why not? Now, this week's final story might be the closest you can get to having your own anime made. Pre-orders open this week for a robotic vacuum modeled after one of the tanks from the Girls und Panzer franchise. The vacuum comes complete with 45 voice recordings from voice actress Mai Fujigami, the voice of main character Miho, who pilots this featured tank. The limited edition vacuum also features compatibility with smartphone apps, as well as the Google Assistant and Amazon's Alexa. So yes, you can tell Alexa to turn on your vacuum, who will then yell, "Panzer IV!" We live in amazing times. Yeah, that's the thing. And just to be clear, like, I get it. Totally. Like, I'd buy that for $1. I'm totally up for that. It's goofy, but so are many other things in life. I have no complaints about goofiness in the world. There we go. Melty Blood from Type Moon, cool. I'm curious actually. So let me check, because I haven't actually looked this up. Girls und Panzer vacuum. It's on ANN. Mail order site Plus Style. I'm pulling up the site now. It's a whole yeah. There's a whole intro. There it is. This is hilarious. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the chat because you all need to see this. So you want to check out the Girls und Panzer vacuum, and there's Miho right there. Product buy. Oof, that's $500. 49,800 yen for that smart vacuum. That's a little much for me. That's a little much for me. They do have some kind of product timeline. Something's coming in 2020 apparently. I don't know, but it looks like a Roomba. It's basically a Roomba. Let's be honest. And yeah, voice lines from Miho. That's pretty amazing. I want to do that. Like I said, I'd buy it. We can absolutely talk about tropes in anime. I actually also would not mind talking about. I've been thinking about this a bit recently. Successful Western cartoons that borrow from anime, right? Which is kind of interesting. The idea of obviously there's trade back and forth between the different things. Basically, looking at Western shows that we think sort of took the right lessons from anime. They're not like anime in America necessarily, but I think that's an interesting thing. But yes, tropes. Tropes are a thing. Tropes exist. Tropes are, to an extent, a trope is just an element of a genre. I do think folks get a little over focused on tropes, and they think that like all tropes are bad, when tropes are just patterns. common patterns, but that's okay. But I think a few folks try to define like every pattern as a trope, or every element of a genre as a trope, and it's like, well, you know, I don't mind that detectives in noir films are typically sort of gritty, dark people. Like that's kind of how that genre works. You can do other things with it, but that is, a noir film kind of needs certain elements to it. But yeah, we have lots of tropes in anime. I think it's really interesting when we see tropes cross genres in anime. Like when we get, say, when we saw Moe start to really cross over into like action shows, things like that. I think that's really fascinating when you get these tropes that are they become so ubiquitous. They start to really change anime as a whole, or other genres as well. Right. So when I see an action comedy, I always get interested in that, and not just like an action series that contains comedy, but something that is actually, that has fun with the action. Right. There's comedy around the action. I think Agent Aika is a great example of that, where that is a James Bondy sort of international super spy show set in a kind of a near future sci-fi world, where almost every shot contains a panty shot. Certainly every scene contains a panty shot, and it was integrating this trope and doing it in a way that was just so insistent that it made the panty shot kind of obscene and really boring, frankly. Like, I couldn't watch panty shots the same way after that show, because it was really kind of making fun of the fact that yes, it's easy to do this, let's just do it all the time and show you how ridiculous it is. I think it's kind of cool when folks explore that and play around with that, because it is ridiculous. It is really goofy. But yeah, I think there's so you like it when an anime sort of turns a genre on its head, or turns a trope on its head. So yes, I think that's an example of where Agent Aiko is doing that. I'm trying to think of other good examples. Jay, do you have some examples in your head that you wanted to sort of bring up there? I think Mao-chan, which we mentioned once or twice on here, which is a parody of Japan's obsession with cuteness, right? I thought that was a lot of fun. Konosuba, I admit. Konosuba, I've not watched or read Konosuba, so I cannot comment on that one, unfortunately. One Punch Man? Sure, yeah, and One Punch Man is obviously making fun of superhero tropes particularly, and shonen kind of generally, kind of, sort of, kind of. But yeah, definitely One Punch Man is turning the power progression of most stories kind of on its head. Certainly the power progression of a shonen series on its head. And just the general concept of superheroes. My Hero Academia, I think, also is really playing around with superheroes in a real way. You could argue Akira was taking the trope of the gritty, the gritty, dark sort of horror thriller storyline, turning it on its head by treating it with gravity, a certain amount of gravity, by saying, what if this actually happened? What if we really had psychic children and an oppressive government and all that kind of stuff? I didn't get into One Punch Man at all either. That is not a show for me, but it certainly did that, right? It was certainly a parody of that. But you could argue that One Piece is kind of a parody of shonen, because of how ridiculously over the top those powers are, and how ridiculous the world and environment of One Piece is, right? Obviously, it's also a functional shonen series, but I think, if you read, especially if you read the first few chapters of One Piece, it really feels like it's playing around with shonen tropes and shonen archetypes a bit, which is always fun. One second, I'm just trying to get the camera a little bit. That's a bit better. I think one of the problems with One Punch Man too is that it takes so long to get started. Like I started watching and folks were like, okay, yeah, and then, isn't this amazing? I was like, no, and then they're like, oh, you need to wait until like episode 5. I was like, oh well, I'm not gonna just slog through it until it gets good. Like it needs to grab me fairly quickly. There are exceptions, of course, but One Punch Man just did not do it for me, which is fine. Not all anime is for everybody. So Ginger, you're saying Konosuba makes fun of isekai's ridiculousness. Fair. And I think we're starting to see that in the isekai genre in general. We're seeing stuff like, Do You Love Your Mother is definitely making fun of the isekai genre. So we're starting to push beyond those boundaries. Kind of doing for isekai what Haruhi did for Moe. And kind of parodying all of those concepts. Magical Shopping Arcade. Who? Yeah, totally. Because that's really a parody of a lot of anime and a lot of anime tropes and genres all thrown into one show. That's really all Shopping Arcade does is throw shade at various genres. And I have not seen much of. I've just seen bits and pieces of Shopping Arcade. That's a lot. That's a lot of fun. Evangelion definitely. I'm not sure about Gurren Lagann. I've not seen enough Gurren Lagann, late stage Gurren Lagann, to say. But I think Gurren Lagann is more of a love letter to cheesy giant robot shows. That's classic. I think Gurren Lagann is more Super Robot turned up to 11, and really celebrating that as opposed to really turning it on its head, right? Gurren Lagann it obviously does get big and ridiculous, but so does Gunbuster, right? So Evangelion certainly. I mean, we've talked about how Evangelion's kind of central conceit is to subvert super robot tropes and sort of do super robot tropes in a real robot world, in a way. I think Cell Saga is more of just a straight comedy parody show, right? It's more of a Big Bang Theory, if you will, although more of a more telling stories with characters and so forth. It's not a sitcom, but I think Excel Saga is more just a comedy of that. It's interesting. Original Gundam in a lot of ways was very much this. Okay, let's take giant robots and really turn that on its head and think through what that would actually be like. Create a world where giant robots could conceivably exist. Would there be reasons for that? The hero and his elf bride open a pizza parlor in another world. I have not heard of that one, but I desperately want to read it now. I am now Googling that. There it is on Amazon. After a pizza delivery bike slammed right into me, I was sent flying into another world where a goddess had 3 options as to how I might be reborn. Apparently, though, some other guys got there before me and snapped up the sword-wielding and magic-hurling options, leaving me to save the world with pizza. I never asked to be a high-calorie hero. And the cover is sure enough like a guy in a pizza parlor with this cute, lowly elf girl next to him, and another like tsundere elf girl looking in the window. That's hilarious. Let's see here. A lot of some negative reviews, and one very positive review that a lot of folks find helpful. It's actually a parody or satire of the existing tropes within that subgenre to just sort of mess around with the overused concepts and have a little fun in the process. Additionally, each chapter is meant to be read as individual short stories or drabbles that fit together as the sum total of a greater whole. The characters are all meant to fit certain archetypes within this trope-heavy subgenre. Cool. Okay, let's see here. It's sadly not on Kindle. Otherwise, I'd buy it now. I'm trying to go as I'm trying to go as strong on Kindle as possible. Um, Reborn as a Vending Machine. Yeah, I have come across that one. I read the sample chapter of Vending Machine and found that to be a lot of fun. Um, so yeah, we're definitely playing around with that genre now. Um, as to where that's going, I have no idea. Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot of tropes out there, and it's hard. Is being scary a trope of the horror genre? Is shocked reactions a trope of the horror genre? I'm all uh, for inspecting genres and kind of questioning them, but it's kind of like also that's or examining tropes. But also there comes a point where it's like, oh, they're just tropes. We should really just relax, right? Yeah, I've heard that. I think it was that one is getting an anime. I've been killing slimes for 300 years, um, which looks like fun. You know, no complaints there. That looks like a fun, goofy one. It's hard to find actual horror in anime. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of horror anime that's just creepy, and there's just dark alleyways and people having scared reactions to things and a little body horror here and there. But there's not much in the way of like horror. Um, I think the first real horror anime I came across was Demon City Shinjuku, and even that is basically it's an action movie with again like body horror with like a Spider Woman who creeps down the walls and things like that. Where it's like okay, it's definitely horror, but it's not like it's definitely horrible, but it's not horror in the sense of the movie Halloween or the movie Alien, where that really kind of gets to your gut. And I think that gets down to just the whole, how do you market that? Anime is generally not aimed at a demographic that responds too well of that. Magical Girl Sight, yeah. I mean, Serial Experiments Lane, which I bring up every week, was structured as a horror series. So one of the things I find so interesting about it is that Kanaka said he wrote that and structured it as a horror series, but it is not a horror concept. It has horrific concepts in it, right? Things bad things happen, but he said basically we had this idea of taking a sort of a techno thriller, but presenting it to the audience as though it's horror, and I think it's one of the reasons why it's so effective. Boogie Pop Phantom is a horror series. I think Boogie Pop Phantom is one of the few like horror anime series because there are horrible things that happen kind of out of nowhere, but that also are kind of motivated, and you're trying to figure out what's all going on there. Right? Yeah, Lane has that kind of weird suspense and that sense of bad things happening, and that there's some logic to it, but you can't tell what. Much like a lot of the slasher films, but it's not that the underlying story is not a killer out stabbing people. Parasite, yeah, definitely originally horror. But yeah, it is weird because I think horror isn't very marketable. At least in a lot of other countries, I think it is marketable over here in America, and in some other Western countries, but it's not as monetizable in other countries. I think, especially for teenagers. Anime generally aimed at a younger teen audience. The Dragon Ball Z's and such, even like tweens and preteens. So they're not that much aimed at that high school, college age, young adult age. It tends to be more into horror. When I think of the average horror fan, I think of high schoolers, young adults first getting into their first jobs, that kind of stuff. Not so much 40 or 50-year-olds, for example, or tweens. Tweens think they're into horror, but they're not actually watching horror. They're watching sort of funhouse horror. So yeah, I think anime is just that age range is not good, which is kind of odd because you have the otaku demographic, which is definitely middle aged men, and middle-aged women, but that doesn't really seem to fit with the whole horror thing. I don't know why. And Japan certainly has a thriving horror genre, like in film, The Ring and so forth. But it just doesn't seem to translate into anime for some reason. There's a fair amount of horror manga. There's a lot of horror manga, and I think a lot of it too is untranslated. Like we've seen a fair amount of it, but there's lots more over in Japan that we've just never seen. So that is odd. You have stuff like The Drifting Classroom, that's horror, and it's gross horror, but it's definitely there. We just don't seem to get it. And that's part of. So I posted on the Discord. I'm thinking of making a kind of an anime documentary on YouTube, sort of an intro to anime for folks who aren't into it or maybe want to get into it, but kind of want to know, okay, what am I getting myself into? And when I talked about manga, when I started writing about manga in preparation for that, one of the big things that differentiates manga from comics in other parts of the world is genre diversity, where you can have body horror, you can have goofy comedy, you can have all sorts of other genres in manga, but not, in America, if you go into a comic store, it's 80% superheroes and superhero action stories, which can contain, some of those things, but they tend to be action adventure, basically. Whereas manga is much more diverse. And granted, manga certainly has its action adventure, fantasy adventure, big hitters, the Narutos and such. But that kind of goes there. How's New Boogie Pop? I watched the first few episodes and was impressed with what they were doing, but because I'm such a huge Boogie Pop nerd, I was a little confused with how they were structuring it. And I realized after a few episodes, I was like, I need to stop and wait until there's a lot of Boogie Pop out there and kind of watch it in a larger chunk. Because getting these little half-hour glimpses of it now and again just really isn't a very effective way. And I think Boogie Pop in general is very hard to consume, in half-hour chunks every week. Because it is this very intricate storyline of all these different characters' stories all interweaving, and so I decided to hold off until later to kind of consume it that way. So I will eventually get there. I think Boogie Pop is. So here's the thing. I think the new Boogie Pop is adapting a large amount of the material in a way that is a little more true to the original novels and to kind of the way all that worked. It's going to be a lot more sensible to the average viewer, but it is nowhere near as dramatically stylish as the original Boogie Pop. It's a more traditionally animated adaptation, right? Like the color scheme and so forth is much more traditionally anime. So but I need to sit down to get a sense of, okay, how does that whole story progression feel? What are they telling? And there are a few, not jump scares, but moments that were like, oh my gosh, that happened. Okay, that's a thing. That does have that Boogie Pop Phantom horror. So I really like that. And I'm with you, Matt. Junji Ito just does not work for me. I just, and okay, I'm gonna say it, and I hope this doesn't sound harsh or mean, but I just don't like Junji Ito's art style. It does not appeal to me. I can see why other people would, but it just doesn't really come together. Thanks, yeah, Game Escape. That was a thing. Well, it came from some Discord discussions about some of the that new Netflix This Is Anime or whatever it was documentary, and it's like there aren't really many good what is anime kind of documentaries out there on YouTube or what's so forth and so on. So I think I could make a few videos, maybe even a living set of videos, so it gets revised over time and re-released. So what do you guys think? If you came across a series of videos that was basically okay, I'm going to show my parents this to help them understand anime. I'm going to show it to my little brother who wants to get into anime, whatever. What would you want to see in that series of videos? What would you want it to cover? I definitely want to hit sort of anime in general. manga in general, some of the anime-specific genres like mecha and magical girl and such. Not just series-wise, like what topics would you like it to cover? What do you want your parents, younger sibling, friends to know about anime? Right? So that they don't freak out and be confused and so forth. Contrasting anime fandoms, we can certainly do that. Yeah, I'd like to do some anthropology around anime fandom. And in fact, there was a video from, was it Roger Chow, that I watched recently that I might post a video in reaction to. That's a good point, Ginger. The themes of family and friends being important in life. Yeah, and I think that general sort of focus on the group that anime tends to be so good on, about, coming together with your friends to defeat the bad guy, which I think anime really highlights. Life lessons. Yeah, genres, definitely. Yeah, I'm trying to decide whether to do, and I might do both, whether to do here are all the genres kind of overview video, or to do a video about each genre. Here's shonen, here's shoujo, etc. Got to figure that out. I also got to figure out a good name for it. Anime for outsiders. I don't know. Anime for the uninitiated. Intro to anime. Who knows? Perhaps a brief introduction to, maybe. Yeah, introduce the genre. Give an example. Probably a few different examples. It's always hard to find the canonical magical girl series, because Sailor Moon, but Sailor Moon was very transitional. It was not like the magical girl series before it, that kind of thing. That's a really good point, Game Escape. I love that. Tracking the growth of anime to the bubble economy, and then how it became that soft power, that thing that Japan was exporting. Yeah, yeah, that'd be a really interesting thing to explore, and how the rest of the world really latched onto anime in the '90s, particularly. I think there's a lot of fun stuff there. I'll also need an adventure. Nice. Um, Not bad. I'd also like to talk just sort of generally about how to put this. Things like fan service, things like nudity in anime, to kind of explain. Yes, you will see butts and random nudity and things along those lines, but you don't see sexuality much at all. Or you see how to put it, sexualism but not sex, right? So there are naked girls flying around, but nobody's actually jumping into bed together, which is really weird. Japanese folklore, totally Japanese folklore. That's a big topic. That's going to be interesting to figure out how to, because you're absolutely right. That's a very important thing to cover. But I've got to figure out how to break that down, in helpful ways. Shinto Buddhism, yokai, tanuki, all those different things. Yeah, otaku stigma. That's a big thing, totally. And that weird tension between, okay, here's Japan's soft power, but also people still find anime fans a little weird in Japan. That's an interesting point, Jay. I've always wanted to make something and kind of talk in general about the growth of anime fandom in America, and how that kind of rose and fell over the decades, starting back in the 60s, and how that became a big deal over time, and how that started to influence Japan, and then that changed. Because that's a real roller coaster ride. Ooh, yeah. How anime has been influenced by world history, definitely. It would be cool to do a video about kind of the impact of like World War II on anime, which is a boy. They talk about a big topic, a big hairy topic, but I think you could dive into some of that stuff. Yeah, thanks. These are all good ideas, which I'll have to dig into. Um, oh, that's interesting, Matt. What are some of the live action adaptations she's liked? She's enjoyed. Because there's some really cool ones. And that actually might be a good. That's actually a really good topic. High quality live action adaptations of anime. So if your significant other, parent, whatever, isn't into anime but can handle the live action, that can kind of be a an attack vector, if you will, into anime. Yeah, the rise and fall of anime in the West. The rise and the fall and the rise and the fall and the rise. And hi, Gorilla. Good to see you. Yeah, totally sexuality differences. That's a big deal. Which obviously I'm not the world's biggest expert on, on all that, but it would be good to kind of cover that, and also to cover like the difference between sexuality in culture and the sexuality in media, right? Like there's stuff like this just doesn't get represented in anime, but might be a feature of the culture, but it's just not kind of appropriate for that medium. Um, Gotcha. Cool. That's good to know, Matt. Kamikaze Girls, yeah. I really like Love and Pop, which is Hideaki Anno's live action movie. Well, his first live action movie. I mean, technically, it's not an anime adaptation or anything, but it's about high school girls and subsidized dating, Enjo Kosai, and just kind of um, 90s culture in Japan. This interesting look at Japanese sort of street culture at the time. Um, and it feels kind of anime. It feels anime in kind of that almost Amanabashi sense, where it's not really about Japanese culture, but there is some Japanese culture in there. Um, yeah, I watched Love and Pop, definitely. Um, I love Love and Pop. I might actually have it on DVD here somewhere. Maybe Netflix. Maybe a Netflix release. Um, but yeah, I mean, the Rurouni Kenshin live action movies are the greatest live action adaptations of an anime I've ever seen. In a sense of like kind of getting that right. You're getting the feel of the anime right while also adapting it properly for live action. Um, so if you want to get somebody into there you can go. Yeah, I often like describe scenes from Love and Pop to people to say there's this amazing moment because I love that. Um, but yeah, well, the Mushishi live action movie is like really good. Again, really faithful, but also feels like its own thing. They figured out, well, Mamoru Oshii, and he figured out how to make that feel right in live action. You don't need to do much, but Mushishi can't quite feel exactly like an anime. Yeah, I mean, as a massive Kenshin fan, I had no complaints about that live action thing, even to the point where like they do things to suggest that they can't go that far or they're not adapting certain things, and then later on, oh no, we're going there. They give you what you want later on in those movies. But yeah, that'd be an interesting video in general. What are sort of anime adjacent live action movies that feel like anime or give you that satisfaction of anime, that kind of tone that anime often has, and can be that middle ground. Well, Redline is one of those movies I would recommend to like people who love animation. Maybe they don't like anime, but Redline is such a distinctive. It has such a distinctive visual style. It's not anime, and so it can get folks into it, kind of like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Just this bizarre thing, and folks can get into that. Yeah, Samuel L. Jackson, totally. Right, and that's the thing. Those fantastical elements of Rurouni Kenshin just wouldn't work in live action. It just wouldn't feel right. Um, and so there's some over the top action in those Kenshin films. They're doing things that running up walls and stuff like that. But it's just on that edge of you know the Fast and the Furious style ridiculousness of action that doesn't turn it into Superman. Oh, the Yakuza live action movie. I've actually not seen that. I would like to see that. Now that I've played some of the Yakuza, if there's some Yakuza Kiwami, I kind of get that. I kind of get that franchise. That'd be a lot of fun to check out one of these days. Has anyone seen the Lupin live action movies? Because I've heard mixed things about that, about those. Because there've been one or two of them, been a couple of, and I've heard either they're terrible or again, it's one of those things where it's not Lupin anime, but it does one or the other of them, one or some of them, do a decent job of adapting that franchise. That's nice, Game. Okay, yeah, I'm there. I'm all for that. I need to finish Kiwami one of these days. I'm fairly close to the end, I think. Maybe I'll hook up the PS4 again sometime soon and do some more live streaming of Yakuza. That was a fun game. I got kind of bogged down at one point where the plot became kind of okay. But what video game could become an anime? Shenmue? Oh yeah, totally. Just from what little I've seen of Shenmue, that is anime all over the place. Yakuza, Durhei. Trying to think. I'm skimming through a lot of the thoughts about a lot of the other anime I've seen, or a lot of the video game footage I've seen lately. And obviously you have the visual novels and such that really fit. Well, we've had a number of Persona anime, so I feel like we've already got Persona covered. Um, hmm. I would like to see an anime adaptation of. You know what, Jay? That's a great call. Days Gone. Um, I got a few hours into Days Gone and just adored it, but got busy with other things. And I think you could do a really interesting, apocalyptic zombie story with Days Gone. The thing is, I would want a Days Gone anime that is just straight seinen. It's Ghost in the Shell. There's it is this gritty survival tale of a guy more or less alone dealing with all of these things. I think you do some really interesting stuff. I'd probably want an OVA for Days Gone. That would really work. Skyrim, totally. Skyrim would work. Um, I'd love to see an anime of Octopath Traveler because I love the visual style of the concept artwork, and the pixel style is cute too, and it's really cool. It's really interesting. But I'd love to see those character designs, that sort of rococo world, that heavily stylized world adapted in an anime way. I agree. I think Harvest Moon, they're putting money on the table there, leaving money on the table. Yeah, I would love to see a Zelda anime, like a Breath of the Wild style Zelda anime, where it's this guy exploring this world and interacting with people and trying to figure all that out. Because I think Breath of the Wild has this interesting kind of post-apocalyptic vibe, which gives an edge to the world, makes it a little bit more adult, makes it a little bit more interesting. And then essentially every episode is its own. Every episode is coming to a different town, or interacting with a different group of bokoblins or whatever. I should go back to that video game. I never finished it. My gosh, that was an amazing experience. Demon Gaze, cool. I haven't tried Demon Gaze. I downloaded a bunch of demos for the Switch recently and played through a bunch of those. There was one that's like a detective investigation game by I think Square Enix. Is it Nagami, maybe? No, that can't be right. And it's interesting because one of the mechanics is you talk with somebody, and then you get it pops out of that into a 360-degree view of a room. So you use your stick or your controller or whatever to zoom around the room and look around the room and look for clues, basically. So you're in one static spot, but you can look all around you to look for, is there something wrong with the door or the window or whatever, and kind of zoom into various spots. It's a really interesting idea. We don't get a lot of like real detective stories, so a cool investigative detective story would be awesome. But let's kind of go a little bit bigger than that. I'm thinking of Nintendo franchises. And again, it's the weird thing is, Ni no Kuni. Obviously not a Nintendo franchise, but there are things that are basically anime already. I think a Ni no Kuni anime would be amazing, or could be amazing. But like Mario, I don't think Mario works very well as like a TV series. And there have been obviously Mario cartoons and such, but it's just not very satisfying. Mario is a video game character, and he works because he's interacting with this bizarre video game world where you jump on things and squash them to kill them. I think that's kind of weird. But you know what I think would be really a really awesome anime? Overwatch. I think Overwatch is just a really interesting world, interesting set of characters, and it feels very anime in that way. And you could get some interesting some depth, some backstory to those characters in that world. Yeah, and it's like the Warner Brothers cartoons, Bugs Bunny and so forth. Like, it's really hard to do a 26 episode TV series of Bugs Bunny as like a sitcom. They did recently, and I actually really liked that, the Looney Tunes sitcom. I thought it was, it had very much its own taste and its own genre. But I thought once you understood what it was trying to do, it was kind of making this very mundane version of the Looney Tunes characters, and occasionally riffing off of that. It's fun, but people just loathe that. Those characters make a lot more sense than just these little one-off stories, so you could do like a Super Mario Brothers cartoon. But it's hard. F-Zero, yeah. Unfortunately, F-Zero does not sell very well. If you look up the sales of the F-Zero games, it's just very much, it's, X, 80% of that, 80% of that, 50% of that. Every F-Zero game has just made less and less money. So I think it's one of those things that unfortunately is beloved, but the economics on that scare off Nintendo. They just look at those numbers and they're like, nope, we're never going to do it. Star Tropics, nice. Obviously, tons of RPGs, which I've never played. People always talk about Final Fantasy as having lots of anime potential in general, and I think that's absolutely true. You could totally tell some amazing stories with Final Fantasy. But then again, they tried, and it was not very well received with Unlimited. Final Fantasy Unlimited, which is a shame. And I think that kind of put the nail in that coffin, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, Secret of Mana, Chrono Trigger, whatever, all of those things could totally make effective anime, really fun anime. Part of the problem, though, is a lot of those RPGs are set in fairly generic worlds. So that it's like an Isekai series where it's like, oh yeah, it's a fantasy world with elves and, dragons and such. I mean, they're cute elves, but that's about it. It's Deedlit as opposed to Drizzt, but still. I think into weird stuff like Bomberman, which I mean, wasn't there a Bomberman anime? I think there was, like back in the '90s or something. Same in Mortal Kombat, yeah. Well, I mean, lest we forget, Street Fighter II had one of the best respected movies of the '90s. One of the best respected anime movies of the '90s was a Street Fighter II movie. Um, right? I think that works. Surfing anime, yeah. There was that one from last year about the guy who moves out to the beach and is gonna go surfing, but everyone like hangs around naked all the time, but just the guys. Which I really had high hopes for, but it was just nope. But yeah, that is kind of weird. I mean, there's plenty of surfing in Japan, or around Japan. It's a big part of that world. So political intrigue, yeah. Ghost in the Shell. Give me more of that any day. Yeah, unfortunately, I think Street Fighter Two's time has kind of come and gone as this juggernaut of cultural, you know, cultural relevance. Obviously, it's still people still know what Street Fighter Two is, but it's not that massive draw for whatever reason. Is a potential for some anime that was lost? You mean like rescuing an old franchise that's kind of died off? I hope so. Yeah, we got Boogie Pop, right? I got a remake. So yeah, absolutely. The one I always go back to is El Hazard. I think El Hazard was a really remarkable franchise. It was the first isekai franchise that I know of, and it just kind of fell off the radar. It had its heyday in the '90s and then disappeared, and I think you could really come back and do that. Folks may be scared off by the sort of Middle Eastern inspired fantasy world, with worries that you get angry letters. I think that'd be really cool. Yeah, Shaman King. Please give me Shaman King. I have a whole shelf of that. That's all Shaman King right there. All those black books. That's not even all the manga. Pilot Candidate. Yeah, I was surprised Pilot Candidate never took off. That felt like a franchise that could really go somewhere. Outlaw Star, frankly, I thought would go somewhere, but it kind of did the Cowboy Bebop thing, where we have Outlaw Star and that was it. And I think that was also, I mean, that is kind of Sunrise's MO. Sunrise doesn't really do long-term franchises unless it's really intending to do that. Yeah. So much merch for Shaman King in Japan. Interesting. Then I would not be surprised to see that pretty soon. I mean, we got the Hunter x Hunter remake, right? We have Dragon Ball Super, not a remake, but definitely a return of that franchise. So I'd love to see more Shaman King. Trigun. Trigun's not going to happen, unfortunately, just because Trigun kind of died in Japan. But that would be awesome. That'd be really cool. King of Bandits Jing. Wow, I have not heard that name in 10 years. That's very cool. That was a really interesting sort of stylized anime. Yeah, I did not know that Shaman King was still that big in Japan. That's really cool. But I mean, heck, when I was in Japan in 2012, they were heavily advertising a new Slayers pachinko machine. Right next to Dragon Ball Z and Escaflowne, or I'm sorry, Evangelion, was Slayers. I'd love to see a Slayers return. I'd love to see a new Slayers anime, because I think that we are ripe for a fantasy comedy, something that is, with Critical Role and all these things that are in Dungeons and Dragons on the rise. I think a really fun fantasy adventure, a very D&D-esque fantasy adventure. Yes, I do, Ginger Gaiden. Look for G Archaeology on Twitter. The letter G Archaeology, and you'll find me. Little GA logo there. It's basically just an announcement feed, but it's there. Cool. Yeah, I'd love to see your Shaman King stuff. That's really cool. Yeah, I feel really bad for Shaman King that it came out at just like the wrong time. Could we see a resurgence of Dirty Pair? Because that was pretty big back in the day. And I think a story about two. So here's the thing. I think you could redo Dirty Pair. You'd have to change the outfits. So as long as they were not running around in metal bikinis, I think you can make Dirty Pair work. But I think that there's those outfits are a little too ridiculous and a little too politically incorrect for these days. But I think I think with a a costume update, and they could still be, you know, form fitting, perhaps, a little revealing. But I think Dirty Pair would be a lot of fun, especially really play off the personalities of those two. Heck, let's bring back Bubblegum Crisis. You know, with Cyberpunk 2077 coming out, let's do that. Yeah, there we go. I always tell people to just Google archaeology because it's hard to spell. I never expect folks to spell it right. I can barely. The only reason I can spell it right is because I type it all the time. Archaeology is a weird word. That is just kind of my life. I chose a bizarre word. And actually, it's funny. Evan and I did talk about that, about archaeology being a complicated word to type, and we were just kind of like, oh, well. Yeah, Bubblegum Crisis. You know, that's kick-ass female characters with issues, right? You know, they're not perfect people, but they are heroic, and they're fighting back, and it's about corporate espionage and what it means to be human and all that. And I think Bubblegum Crisis could be very effectively updated, right? Modernized, where it's not just the late '80s or the '90s with mecha, right? But you could really get into some interesting sort of Black Mirror stuff in the Bubblegum Crisis universe with boomers being sorry. My chair is not wanting to be convenient. Yeah, we do sort of a Time of Eve-esque universe of all these boomers everywhere that people are really relying on and that have wormed themselves into society, not just from a functional perspective, but from people care. Like, people love their boomers. And there are boomers who are literally caring for the aged. And you can do some fascinating stuff with that and then deal with these. Again, imagine a story of a handful of these women who are all kind of united in this quest, but they all have their weirdnesses, their quirks, where they're a little bit unstable. They have their problems. You do some really cool stuff in there with that. Heck, a live action, movie version of Bubblegum Crisis done in Japan. Like the Ghost in the Shell movie. I think that'd be really interesting. Or like the Kenshin movies. Yakutate Japan that was a big shonen series at the time. I can see that getting like a Hunter x Hunter remake. We're gonna redo that, re-release it. Although I don't know, did the anime veer off from the manga much in Yakutate Japan? I think we're actually come to that. We are due for a new big food anime. Like a shonen food anime. We had Yakutate Japan back in the day. We had, what was that Shonen Jump one that came out, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years ago, where the guy goes and he hunts fish and then cooks them as meals. Not just fish, but he hunts all these giant monsters and then cooks them as meals. Well, they did remake. Interesting. What was the name of that? That's so frustrating. Toriko. That came out a while ago. I think it's time for another big shonen food anime. I mean, we've had a few fairly popular, food themed ones, but let's have people like destroying mountains for that one rare salmon that's in the mountain. Round meets Trigun, make it happen. I just want to see Vash saying, "Oh bother." That'd be pretty awesome. Yeah, Good Eats is back. Speaking of geeks, speaking of geek archaeology, Good Eats is the geek food cooking show. Full of references to Monty Python and Jaws and all sorts of stuff. Good Eats was one of the really amazing cooking shows of all time, and very, very geeky. And we have a new season airing right now on Food Network, and they put the whole first episode on YouTube for free, so you can go and check it out. And I agree, Gorilla. It's like, yep, that is a Good Eats episode. Like just straight on down the line, he is doing it exactly that. So I'm curious to see. I get the feeling that Alton's going to start mixing it up a little bit and start changing things eventually. But like probably the first few episodes are going to be very safe and very traditional. Then he'll start playing around with it because if there's one thing about Alton Brown, he does not settle. But yeah, it definitely feels good. And it feels like we're right back in the saddle again. Now, if you want to learn how cooking works, Good Eats is the place to go. So yeah. Before I forget, it is still Read or Die. Yeah. Actually, I would just like a new Read or Die. A new anime in the Read or Die universe that is moving that story forward. That's all I ask. Maybe Anita is a little bit older. Anita as a 14-year-old. Up for that. I'm the Alton Brown of anime. I'm honored. I will take that moniker. So in Hobby Hopper, we're wrapping up poetry. In fairness, there's absolutely Alton Brown influence in Geek Archaeology. Yeah. Indeed, when I think about the when I do the cooking stuff, I'm definitely thinking Alton Brown in my head. Let me check real quick. I think I'm still signed into Twitter over here. We'll find out in a second. Am I? Yes, I am. Let me just see notifications. I don't. One second. Hold on. I do not see that on my Twitter, sadly. Unless I have forgotten how to use Twitter, which is quite likely. Wait a minute. Wait. Maybe wrong. Nope, I don't see it yet. But Twitter is weird. Anyway. So actually, I'm just... You know what I should do? It would make a lot more sense if I just did this. Boom. So, as I mentioned a few other times, we've started doing this thing on the Discord called Hobby Hopper. Oh, an old one. That makes sense. Where every month we try a new hobby. August was our first month where we worked on poetry. And we're nearing the end of that, obviously. In fact, we're at the end of that. Last week has been kind of thin on poetry as we've had other things come up. We're looking forward to moving forward with next month where we're going to start digging into sketching. So we're going to take on the hobby of sketching next week. Some of you may remember my Monday drawing streams. And so I'm probably not going to go back to that exact schedule. Cool. Excellent, Ginger. Thank you. But I might do some like live drawing streams throughout the month to kind of play around with it. But we're going to kind of dive into sketching as a hobby to experiment with on throughout the month of September. So you want to stop by the Discord and join us in that. We're going to spend the next week or so pulling together resources for how to sketch, how to learning how to draw. And draw well. And so by sketching we mean essentially pencil on paper. It can be other mediums, you could use charcoal, whatever. But primarily, pencil on paper because that's just a very easy thing to use. And so we'll be, like I said, building up some resources, and then the following week we'll actually start getting into some exercises and try sketching and see how it goes. So if you're interested, please stop by the Discord and join in. And as we get art, I will share them here on the stream if folks agree to that. If the artist releases them, I will show you all some of the stuff we draw. There'll probably be some pretty anime-related stuff. I plan to do some fan art, things along those lines over the course of the month. But this should be fun to just play around and experiment. And there are no wrong drawings, there are no bad drawings. We're just playing around and experimenting. So hope you'll join us for that. All right, I think that's going to do it for us for tonight. I can feel my voice starting to drop. So thank you all, as always, for an amazing conversation. Really appreciate it. And we'll be back next week with more anime stuff. My next few months are pretty free, so I'm not seeing a lot more to block me in terms of doing Friday streams. So thank you all. Have a great week. Until next time, watch more anime.